Welcome back to the Climate Layer. I'm Alex Bonat. I want to start with something small, something you probably do every day without thinking about it. Brushing your teeth. For most of my life, I would turn on the faucet, wet my toothbrush, and leave the water running while I brushed. 2 minutes, water just flowing down the drain. It never occurred to me to turn it off. And then someone pointed out how much water that wastes. If you leave the tap running for 2 minutes twice a day, that is about 4 gallons of water per day, per person. Multiply that by a year and you're looking at over 1,400 gallons just from brushing your teeth. Now, 1,400 gallons sounds like a lot, but here is what really got me. If you can change that one habit, turn off the tap while brushing your teeth, and if you can get other people to do it and they get other people to do it, eventually you have millions of people saving millions of gallons of water from one tiny behavioral change. That realization stuck with me because sustainability can feel overwhelming. The problems are massive. The systems are broken. What can one person possibly do? But then you realize that millions of small decisions add up, and water is one of the clearest examples of that. I also want to tell you about a trip I took. Driving through southern Arizona, visiting the Grand Canyon, learning about the Colorado River. The Colorado River used to flow all the way down to the Gulf of California in Mexico. It carved the Grand Canyon over millions of years. It supported entire ecosystems. Indigenous communities relied on it for thousands of years. Today, the Colorado River barely reaches Mexico. In most years, it doesn't even reach the ocean at all. It gets drained dry before it even gets there. Dams, diversions, irrigation, cities, all of them pulling water out along the way. Standing there, looking at the canyon that river carved, knowing that downstream it is running dry, that hit me. We're not realizing the ripple effects of our water decisions. We see the water right in front of us. We turn on the tap and it flows. But we forget that people downstream need that water too. So today, we're going to talk about water, the planetary boundary we crossed that doesn't get nearly enough attention, where your water actually goes, why geography matters, and what responsible water use looks like when you understand your context. So back in episode 5, we talked about the 9 planetary boundaries, the thresholds that define a safe operating space for humanity. We have crossed 7 of them. One of those 7 is freshwater use, but it's actually more complicated than that. The freshwater boundary has 2 parts, blue water and green water. Blue water is the water we can see, rivers, lakes, groundwater, the water we pump, divert, and use directly. Green water is soil moisture, the water that plants absorb from the ground. It's invisible, but it's critical for agriculture and ecosystems. We have crossed the green water boundary. We have violated it significantly. Why? Because we've changed so much land. Clearing forests, draining wetlands, converting ecosystems to agriculture, that we have disrupted the natural water cycle at a massive scale. The blue water boundary, we're approaching the limit. In some regions, we've already blown past it. Here's the thing about freshwater. It feels infinite. You turn on the tap and water comes out. It rains, rivers flow, lakes exist. How could we possibly run out? But freshwater is finite. Only about 3% of Earth's water is freshwater, and most of that is locked up in glaciers and ice caps. Less than 1% of all the water on Earth is accessible freshwater that we actually can use. And it's distributed unevenly. Some regions have abundant water, others face severe scarcity, and climate change is making that worse. Droughts in some places, floods in others, and less predictable rainfall everywhere. Now, I want to introduce a concept that I think about a lot, one that doesn't get nearly enough attention. You've heard of fossil fuels. Carbon that was stored underground over millions of years, formed from ancient organic matter accumulated long before humans existed. When we burn fossil fuels, we are releasing that stored carbon in a geological instant. We can never put it back. There is a water equivalent of that, and we call it fossil water. Fossil water is ancient groundwater, water that accumulated in underground aquifers thousands, sometimes millions of years ago. Water that fell as rain during ice ages. Water that seeps slowly into rock formations over geological timescales that has been sitting there ever since. Just like fossil fuels, it's not being replenished on any timescale that matters to us. And just like fossil fuels, we are pumping it out and using it like it will last forever. The Ogallala Aquifer is one of the most important examples. It sits underneath the Great Plains of the United States. 8 states: Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, South Dakota. It's one of the largest aquifer systems in the world, and it's been feeding American agriculture for decades. Here's the problem. The Ogallala took millions of years to fill. We're draining it in generations. In some parts of Texas, water levels have dropped more than 300 feet. Farmers who built their lives around the water are watching it disappear. And when it's gone, it's gone. There's no refilling it on any timescale that matters. The same story plays out across the world. The Arabian Peninsula is pulling fossil water from aquifers that have no meaningful recharge. Parts of India, Northern Africa, the water that is feeding billions of people right now, growing the food they eat, is ancient water that cannot be replaced. I want that to land, because when we talk about water scarcity, we often talk about it as a future problem, a distant threat. But the fossil water crisis is happening right now. We're making withdrawals from an account with no deposits, and the balance is running out. So when we talk about crossing the freshwater planetary boundary, we're not just talking about how much rain falls or how much water is in the rivers. We're talking about pulling up water that has been stored for millions of years and treating it like it's renewable. And let's remember, it's not. So let's talk about where water actually goes, because most people dramatically underestimate their water footprint. When you think about your water use, you probably think about showers, toilets, dishes, laundry, direct water use, the stuff you see. The average American uses about 80 to 100 gallons of water per day for direct household use. Showers are the biggest chunk, about 17 gallons for an 8-minute shower. Toilets use about 3 gallons per flush if you have a newer low-flow model, more if you have an older one. Dishwashers, washing machines, drinking water, cooking, all of that adds up. But here's what most people don't realize. Your direct water use is a tiny fraction of your total water footprint. The water you don't see, the water embedded in stuff you buy and the food you eat, is massive. This is called virtual water or embedded water. Let me give you some numbers that could blow your mind. It takes about 1,800 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef. 1,800 gallons for 1 pound. Why? Because you have to grow the feed for the cow. Corn, soy, alfalfa, all of that requires water. Then the cow drinks water. Then you factor in processing. By the time that beef gets to your plate, the water footprint is staggering. Chicken is better, about 500 gallons per pound. Pork is around 600 gallons. But compare that to vegetables, a pound of tomatoes, about 26 gallons. A pound of lettuce, 15 gallons. Your diet has a bigger impact on your water footprint than your shower. And it's not just food. It takes about 2,000 gallons of water to produce 1 pair of jeans, about 700 gallons to produce 1 cotton t-shirt. Your phone, thousands of gallons. Your car, tens of thousands of gallons. Everything you buy ends up requiring water to produce. Mining, manufacturing, processing, shipping, all of it uses water. Now, here's one thing that I think is going to surprise a lot of people, because I want to talk about something that feels invisible, something we think of as clean and digital and weightless. AI and data centers. Every time you use a generative AI tool, Every time a large language model processes a request, every time a data center runs the infrastructure that powers the internet, water is being used, a lot of it. Data centers require enormous amounts of cooling. Servers generate heat, and one of the most efficient ways to cool them is water. Cooling towers, evaporative cooling systems, water in, heat out. Microsoft reported that its global water consumption increased by 34% in 2022 compared to the year before, largely driven by AI infrastructure. Google's water use grew 20% in the same period. These aren't small numbers. We're talking about hundreds of millions of gallons. Researchers at UC Riverside estimate that training a large AI model can consume hundreds of thousands of liters of water, and that's just training. Every query, every generated response, every image produced, all of it draws on water-cooled infrastructure running around the clock. And where are these data centers being built? Often in water-stressed areas. Arizona, Nevada, Texas, Utah, places where cheap land and access to power make economic sense, but where water is already scarce. The AI boom is real. The economic and scientific potential is real, but we have to talk about what it costs. And one of the costs is water. Water we are often pulling from those same stressed aquifers we already talked about earlier. I'm not saying don't use AI. I'm saying that nothing about the digital economy is truly weightless. Everything has a footprint, and the more we understand those footprints, the better choices we can make about when and how we use these tools and what we demand from the companies building them. Here's the kicker. About 70% of global freshwater use goes to agriculture, not households, not industry, agriculture. So when we talk about water scarcity, we're not just talking about people taking long showers. We're talking about how we grow food, what we eat, how much we waste, and increasingly the invisible infrastructure that powers our digital lives. Food waste is water waste. When you throw away food, you're throwing away all the water it took to grow, process, and transport that food. In the US, we waste about 30 to 40% of our food supply. That's not just a moral problem, it's a massive water problem. Now, here's where it gets important. Geography matters a lot. The advice to save water is not universal. What makes sense in Phoenix doesn't make sense in Portland, Maine. If you live in Southwest United States, Arizona, Nevada, Southern California, you live in a water-stressed region. The Colorado River is overallocated. Aquifers are being drained faster than we're recharging them. Reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell are at historic lows. Every gallon matters. In those places, personal water conservation is critical. Shorter showers, low flow fixtures, drought-resistant landscaping, fixing leaks immediately, all of that has real impact because water is genuinely scarce. But if you live in the northeast of the US, it's a little bit of a different story. We do get plenty of rainfall. Our rivers and aquifers are generally healthy. Our water systems are not stressed the way the Southwests are. Does that mean water doesn't matter in the northeast? No. Wasting water is still wasting the energy it takes to pump, treat, and heat that water. And there are local issues. Some towns have aging infrastructure. Some areas face seasonal shortages. But the urgency of the problem is different. So what does responsible water use look like? First, know your context. Where does your water come from? Is your region facing water stress? Are there local droughts or supply issues? If you live in a water-stressed area, every gallon does count. Short showers, efficient appliances, smart landscaping, and being mindful of waste all matter. If you live in a water-abundant area, that focus, it does shift. You should still avoid egregious waste, but your bigger impact is probably on the virtual water side. What you eat, what you buy, what you waste. Second, understand that geography affects agriculture too. Growing almonds in California, which is a water-stressed region, is very different from growing apples in New England, where water is more abundant. Some crops make sense in some places and not in others. But right now, Market forces and subsidies often encourage growing water-intensive crops in water-scarce regions. So the takeaway, there just is no one-size-fits-all solution or answer to water conservation. Context matters. And understanding your context, it is the first step to using water responsibly. So what can all of us actually do? Let me break this down into two categories: high impact and medium impact. So high impact, the things that actually move the needle on our water footprint. The first one, change what you eat. This is the biggest lever you have. Eating less beef dramatically reduces your water footprint. You don't have to go vegan. But if you swap beef for chicken a few times a week or add more plant-based meals, the water savings are massive. And reduce food waste. Meal plan, use leftovers, compost what you can't eat. When you waste less food, you're wasting less water. Second, or number two, know your geography and act accordingly. If you live in a water-stressed area, personal conservation matters. Shorter showers, low-flow fixtures, drought-resistant landscaping, fixing leaks immediately, all that adds up. If you live in a water-abundant area, focus on not being egregiously wasteful, as we just said, but know that your food choices and consumption habits probably matter more than your shower length. Number three, buy less stuff. Everything you buy has a water footprint. Clothes, electronics, furniture, all of it required water to produce. The less you consume, the smaller your footprint. So looking at the medium impact, things that help but aren't game changers, turning off the tap while you're brushing your teeth. Yeah, this saves water. 1,400 gallons per year per person is not nothing. And if millions of people do it, it adds up. But it's not going to solve water scarcity on its own. Shorter showers. In water-stressed regions, this matters. In water-abundant regions, it's more about energy savings. Heating water uses energy, so it matters more when looking at water scarcity. Low-flow fixtures and efficient appliances, these are good investments, especially in water-stressed areas. But again, they're not the biggest lever. Fixing leaks, a dripping faucet can waste thousands of gallons per year. Fix it. That's easy and has real impact. Now, let me be clear. Individual actions matter. Turning off the tap, taking shorter showers, eating less beef, these are good things to do. They add up, and they signal to industries and policymakers that people care about water. But individual action isn't enough. The bigger levers are systemic. Agricultural water use, industrial efficiency, water rights and allocation policies, infrastructure investment to reduce leaks in municipal water systems, incentives and regulations that discourage water-intensive crops in water-scarce regions. If 70% of fresh water goes to agriculture, then fixing agriculture is where the biggest impact lies. That means better irrigation technology, smarter crop choices, reducing food waste at the production and distribution level, and rethinking subsidies that encourage inefficient water use. It also means demanding accountability from the tech sector. Data centers and AI infrastructure need to be built with water efficiency in mind, especially in water-stressed regions. Companies should be publishing their water footprint, setting reduction targets, and being held to them. Some are starting to, most, they just aren't. And it means addressing water rights. In the Western United States, water law is based on old doctrines that do not reflect current realities. Some users have rights to water regardless of scarcity. That needs to change. So yes, turn off the tap when you brush your teeth. Eat less beef. Fix your leaks. But also support policies that address water use at scale. Vote for leaders who take water seriously. Advocate for smarter agricultural practices and better water management. Because the water crisis is not just about individual choices. It's about how we, as a society, allocate, manage, and value water altogether. So let me bring this back to the planetary boundary. We cross the freshwater boundary because we treat water like it's infinite. We pump aquifers dry. We divert rivers until they no longer reach the ocean. We grow water-intensive crops in deserts. We waste about 40% of the food we produce and all the water that went into it. We build AI data centers in water-stressed regions and cool them with water we cannot replace. And underneath all of it, we're drawing down fossil water, ancient stores that took millions of years to accumulate, gone in decades with no way to refill them. The consequences are already here. The Colorado River barely reaches Mexico. The Ogallala Aquifer is declining in ways that threaten American agriculture within this century. The Aral Sea in Central Asia has almost completely disappeared. Aquifers in India, the Middle East, and the Great Plains are being drained faster than they can recharge. Communities around the world face water shortages, droughts, and conflicts over access. Climate change is making things worse. Droughts are becoming more severe and more frequent in many regions. Rainfall patterns are shifting. Glaciers that provide water to billions of people are melting. The water cycle is being disrupted. But here is the thing. Water is renewable if we manage it responsibly. Rivers can refill. Aquifers can recharge slowly. Rain falls, the cycle continues unless we break it. Responsible water use means living within the limits of what the water cycle can provide. It means understanding that water in one place affects water in another. It means recognizing that people downstream need that water too. It means making smarter choices about what we grow, what we eat, what we waste, and what technologies we demand from the companies shaping our digital lives. And it means fixing the systems. Agricultural practices, water rights, infrastructure, corporate accountability that drive unsustainable use. All right, let me take you back to where we started. A toothbrush, a running faucet, 2 minutes, 1,400 gallons a year. It sounds small, and on its own, sure, it is. One person making one small change does not solve the water crisis. I want to be honest about that. But here's what I keep coming back to. Nothing that has ever changed at scale started anywhere other than small. Denmark did not build 50% wind power overnight. Norway did not transform its car market in a single year. Every big shift in how humans relate to the world started within individuals making different choices, talking to other people about those choices, and eventually building enough momentum that systems had to respond. That is not naive, that's history. And water is one of the most personal examples we have because it connects everything. The food on your plate, the clothes you wear, the phone in your hand, the AI tools you use every day, all of it has water in it. All of it draws on a system that is under pressure. When you turn off the tap, you're not just saving 4 gallons. You're making a decision about what kind of relationship you want to have with a resource that millions of people around the world do not have reliable access to. You're building a habit of awareness, and habits of awareness spread. The same is true when you reduce food waste. When you think about where your food comes from and how much water went into it. When you ask companies what their water footprint looks like and whether they are being held accountable. These are not gestures. They are the beginning of something. We crossed the freshwater planetary boundary because we collectively stopped paying attention, because water felt infinite, because the costs were invisible. And we can start crossing back by paying attention again, one decision at a time. Millions of people making millions of small choices that, together, add up to something that looks a lot like change. Turn off the tap when you brush your teeth. Not because it solves everything, because it's the kind of person you want to be. And because the kind of person you want to be, multiplied by millions, is how the world actually changes. Every drop counts, especially when millions of people are counting drops. So next time, episode 11, we're going to talk about something that sits at the root of almost everything we've discussed on this show. Why do so many people reject climate science when the evidence is so clear? Where did that skepticism come from, and who benefits from keeping us confused? It's a topic I think about a lot. And I think once you understand the history and the strategy behind climate denial, you'll never look at a skeptical headline the same way again. Until then, think about your water, where it comes from, where it goes, and what it means to use it responsibly. As always, thanks for listening. I'm Alex Bernard, and this is The Climate